All right. So now we're into the next chapter of Ekman, and this is going to be discussed in Contempt. Let's talk about contempt. And I went ahead and pulled the Merriam-Webster definition because it's a good one, right? The act of despising, right? The lack of respect or reverence for something, the state of being despised. Here we have a facial expression that's depicting contempt. Basically, what you've got is one side of the mouth being lifted or pulled, is a really good sign of contempt. It's oftentimes referred to as a sneer. Um, so I thought it would be important to talk a little bit about John Gottman's model. And, Ekman talks about it a little bit in the book. And some of you may have encountered John Gottman's Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse conversation in the past. If you've taken my human sexuality class, you absolutely have seen it before. Um, but I've elaborated a little bit for the purposes of this context because I want to try and emphasize the contempt part of it and the implications for relationships. So the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse are criticism. Here we have, if you know Peanuts at all, Lucy is always berating and criticizing Charlie Brown, right? So that's what she's doing here in this one, as usual. You're weak and spineless, wish you were the right. Like that's criticism, and I'm sure we've all experienced it. We've probably all doled it out. I mean, let's be honest. Contempt. There's nothing like a good sneer to dry up conversation. How's mine look, right? And I like it because this is like a tween who's doing it. He's got his spiky hair and he's all full of attitude, right? A lot of times tweens will show this kind of contempt to the adults that they know. It might be their parents or their teacher, or my Girl Scouts showed it towards me and my co-leader. We're like, you realize we're volunteers. We didn't have to take you camping. Don't be talking, do not be rolling your eyes at us, right? Because contempt, Ekman talks a lot about the sneer that goes with contempt, but I would like to add in, there's more to it, right? There's eye roll, there's a sharp exhalation. If you could have seen me, you would have seen my eyes rolling. I had a little bit of a sneer while I did that, kind of looked at the ceiling. You jet your chin a little bit, right? There's a lot that goes along with contempt that a lot of times an actor who's displaying these contemptuous behaviors think that they're just behaving in an exasperated way. But as a person who's receiving the eye roll, the huff, the sneer, it's clearly contempt. It's a person who clearly has no respect, right? Um, Defensiveness is one of the other four horsemen. So here we have a person who has brought a balloon to the party that has a face drawn on it. And he says, "What's that funny look for? You think my girlfriend's an airhead, don't you?" People who are defensive see themselves as under attack all the time. And so they have to defend themselves against the perceived attacks. And then we've got stonewalling. And stonewalling is where you just refuse to discuss the topic. And so here we have the president of Stonewall Inc. saying, actually, I fail to see where this is leading, and I no longer wish to continue this conversation. Right? Like there's nothing to say. I'm going for a walk. I don't want to talk about it. So these are our four horsemen. So I just thought I'd share with you what Gottman has found. Now, the thing that's kind of frustrating about John Gottman is that he published a few articles revealing his actual results back in the mid 1990s, and then subsequently has produced most of his evidence in books. And books are great. I love a good book, and we probably can trust what John Gottman has in his books. But one of the problems is that they aren't peer reviewed, and they're not necessarily based on studies that you can actually look at the methodology and things like that. So I'm going to just be clear as I'm presenting Gottman's research that some of it has been peer reviewed and produced with the method section and the results and things that we can all look at and analyze. Some of it has been presented in books that were intended for popular consumption. And so it's a little tricky. So we've got the four horsemen of the apocalypse I already mentioned, and they predict early divorcing. And he said, they usually, when they are present, you're usually looking at about 5.6 years after the wedding before the four horsemen ultimately kill the marriage, right? His research, by the way, is all focused on marital satisfaction, so that's why you keep seeing marriage. The average couple waits 6 years before seeking help for marital problems. So if you've got the four horsemen of the apocalypse present and you've made it to 6 years, you're probably in pretty significant crisis and you've got some pretty big habits that you've developed. Um, half of all marriages that end do so within the first 7 years. So yeah, you've got this acute little period between, like, the wedding and 7 years to straighten out a lot of these communication styles. Emotional withdrawal, the absence of positive affect during conflict discussions predict later divorcing. So couples that don't, all couples will disagree and argue. And we know this for sure because Gottman would bring couples into his lab at the University of Washington. He would seat them in chairs where they were facing each other, and he had a camera trained on each of their faces. And then he would analyze the videos side by side to see, as one spoke, how did the other one react. And he looked at not only the verbal things that they would say, but also their facial expressions and body postures. So it was a two-pronged analysis. And one of the things he found is that, oh, and I forgot to say that he would put them in these chairs and he would tell them to think of something that they have disagreed about in the last week. And that's the topic of conversation. Go. And then he leaves the room and they talk. And then he evaluates the videos afterwards. And what he found is that in the couples who were successful, 16.2 years after the wedding was the average duration of these longer married couples. The ones who were in successful, happy marriages had, even in the midst of a conversation that was difficult, they would pull up shared humor, some joke that they both knew. And they both laugh at it. And a lot of times Gottman and his crew who were analyzing the videos are like, that wasn't even a joke. Like, why are they both laughing? But it was something that for them was a callback from something, or, it was self-deprecating or something like that. They showed affection to each other. They would say, I love you. And they would reach out and touch each other's hands and do things during this conflict to reassure the other partner, I'm still here and I still care, right? And that empathy. I understand how you're feeling. I see your point of view. I want to see your point of view. These are the things that he was talking about as being really positive affect. And when those were not present, he said the absence of those things. So in couples who were bound for divorce, they would display emotional withdrawal and they would not display any of this kind of positive affect. They were, you do this wrong. You don't care about me. One member might say, you don't care about me. And the other wouldn't take that for what it was, which was a bid for reassurance. They wouldn't take that opportunity. No, I do care about you. I want to understand you. Like that's what would happen in a positive affect, right? In a positive conversation, you would say, no, I do want to understand. That's why this is frustrating, because I can't understand what you want or what we're talking about. So that absence of those kinds of things is what predicted divorce. Stonewalling occurs when the listener enters diffuse physiological arousal, like their heart rate is exceeding 100 beats per minute. They feel like they're under attack, and that fight or flight response kicks in and they cannot think clearly. And so they're like, you know what? I don't want to talk about this anymore. I don't want to look at you anymore. And really what they just feel completely threatened. They want to fight or they want to flee, and they can't do either one. I've been told to sit in this chair for this psychological thing I'm doing, and I can't fight with you. You're my partner. We're not going to physically fight. So all I'm going to do is just sit here and not even talk. I'm just going to cross my arms. I'm going to cross my legs. I'm going to look over there and not at you. And I'm not going to talk anymore. Through analyzing these four horsemen and stuff like that over time, by 2002, his first research on this came out in the early 90s. By 2002, he was up to 90% accuracy in his predictions of which couples were likely to divorce and which ones were likely to be able to weather these tribulations and stay together. He also noticed that 69% of conflict in relationships is really about some unresolvable perpetual problems. There are things in every relationship that are like, I'm just going to have to learn to live with this. Nobody's perfect. Nobody is going to do exactly what we all want to do all the time, right? It's not ever going to work like that. So everybody's got every relationship has some unresolvable perpetual problems where it's going to be like, I'm either going to have to accept that this is how my partner is or leave, right? Like we're going to have to decide. You can end up gridlocked if you keep revisiting and trying to make your partner change. And that's what he knows. About 16% of these perpetual issues involve these kind of gridlocked, neither one is willing to just kind of compromise and say, I guess this is how it's going to be, and I'm going to have to change my, problem focused coping versus emotion focused coping, where you just have to say, I'm going to have to do some emotion. I obviously can't do problem focused coping because I can't get my partner to stop doing the behavior I don't like. So I'm going to have to do emotion focused coping and change my reaction to it and tell myself this, what opportunity it is present for me to do something for myself or whatever else it is, right? Like, how can I cope with this? I'm thinking about a Instagram reel that I saw earlier this morning where this new mom was just gave birth, and her husband says, "Oh, while I'm off for paternity leave, I'm going to work on the bathroom." And she now she's changing the baby's diaper back at home, and said, "Oh, I'm going to go out and see my friends for a little while." And she felt like, here she is with the baby, and he keeps leaving, and he's not there to be with her and the baby. And as an older mom who has two adult children, I can tell you that, and one of the adult children has three children, and I'm watching the dad across the three children go through exactly what my husband went through, which is with that first child, the dads oftentimes feel marginalized. Like this new couple called his wife and child don't really need him, and there's really no space for him, and there's really nothing he can do for a newborn, and especially a nursing one, and he just feels alienated. um, Putting a little meme together on Instagram showing, basically that the dad is not tuned in is the kind of thing that can make like a gridlocked relationship where she's like, "You're never here," and he's like, "You don't even need me anyway," and then you put it in public to make it look like I'm not tuned in, right? A positive way to deal with it is to say, "Wow, I would really like it if you could, take one feeding a day and I get to take a nap and you've got the newborn and you guys can bond." Or to say, "You know what? I recognize that in this acute period of the newborn phase, dad might not feel like he has a lot to contribute. So what's he doing? He's trying to fix the bathroom for us." Or, you know what I mean? Or he's going and getting his emotional needs met with his friends so that he doesn't have to, like, take any more from me who's already giving everything to the baby. Like, look at it through a positive lens. And so, a lot of times when we look at couples that are having difficulty, they're not giving each other grace. They're not seeing it from each other's perspective and stuff like that, and they get gridlocked. 85% of stonewallers in heterosexual relationships are men. And I think anybody who's in a heterosexual relationship or is male knows that's probably true. Like, men oftentimes don't want to talk about stuff that isn't going to get fixed. And so, like, why are we even talking about this if it's not going to get fixed? Or a lot of times men feel like their female partner is going to berate them, make them feel bad, do a lot of criticism. And so they stonewall because they don't want to hear it, or they become defensive and they start fighting back. And so a lot of times we see stonewalling as a response to criticism. 80% of the time in heterosexual couples, it's the woman who brings up issues in the marriage. And so you can imagine that a lot of times the male in the marriage is feeling like he's blindsided by these things because she brings up stuff that it hadn't even occurred to him. He didn't know it was a problem, and now we're in a fight. And so if men are aware, or if they are made aware that the heterosexual men who are in relationships with women might be aware that women are noticing stuff, and they might bring it up, and it might feel like a criticism, but it might be just a discussion about how things are and how they could be better or something like that. That might help to reduce stonewalling. It might also help with reducing defensiveness. A really important ratio is that one on the top right, that in stable marriages where people are getting along and they're likely to stay together, there's a 5-to-1 ratio of positive communications to negative communications during conflict. Whereas in the unstable marriages, the ratio is 0.8 positive to 1 negative. So they are more negative than positive in the conflict, the relationships that are full of conflict. So again, I like to always go back to Skinner's model of reinforcement. If you spend your time focusing on positive things and talking about positive things more often and encouraging, Skinner says to reinforce the behaviors you want to see again. So thank you for taking out the garbage. Thank you for this nice dinner. Thank you for, waiting up for me, even though I know you have to get up early in the morning, but I had to finish this up. Thanking your partner for the thoughtful things that they do means that you'll spend much more time talking about positive things. And then when you do have to bring up something that's not necessarily positive, there's a lot of positivity already there. And that has good benefits over the long term. that middle one is just emphasizing that he followed a lot of couples over a long time, right, to get these patterns down. And then talking about that baby example, 67% of new parents experience a precipitous drop in couple satisfaction when there's a baby present. They are demanding, they are unrelenting, they're a great source of joy, but they are also huge stressors. And so you have to have a big impact on a relationship. So this example that I gave from the Instagram feed this morning is very relevant, right? That we have to, when couples enter into parenthood, they have to reorganize their relationship and how they talk to each other to ensure that everybody's feeling loved and everybody's feeling like they're getting enough attention, right? Because the baby will get as much attention as the baby needs. Like that is going to be a given. So it's a matter of whether the couple will get the attention that they need from each other. All right, this is a perfect time to slide into this video in the playlist, which kind of illustrates some of the stuff that I just talked about, but this was put out by the actual Gottman Institute. So enjoy that video, and I will see you after that.